Uncle Frank won't let me watch the movie, but the big kids can.
What movie was that?
I think it was Angels with Filthy Souls.
On Video Home System.
I tell you what.
Video cassette.
You know where I saw most of my movies?
Where?
When I was a kid?
Yeah.
It was at home.
At home.
Yeah, and it was something that I usually rented from a store.
Yes.
You heard about
video
these?
Rental store.
Video
Absolutely.
rentals. They used to have these things.
Used to have them all over the place.
Before Netflix, before Disney Plus, Paramount Plus, whatever else plus, video rental stores.
Plus Times Squared.
Yeah. You had a VCR at home, which allowed you to play these tapes.
You're damn right you did.
And it was maybe either Betamax or VHS. But yeah, you go to a store. I went to Blockbuster. What was your experience? You go to Blockbuster?
No. Now, that's interesting because, you know, as a kid watching cable TV, I would see commercials for Blockbuster Video. And I thought, man, I want to go to Blockbuster. That looks awesome. I was clearly one of their target markets, and the advertising worked on me. I think what it took me much longer to realize later into adulthood was that my local video rental stores were so much quirkier, and they were much more curated. They were owned by local individuals who had a real deep vested interest in cinema and in movies. They had to know their market. They had to know their community, right? They had to buy things strategically. And my home video store was called We Are Movies. And they had just the hugest collection of just old Westerns and weird sci-fi movies. And I mean, I saw so many movies that I never would have seen at Blockbuster. Also, they didn't care if you were 6 years old renting an R-rated movie. They didn't care.
Well, see, my experience was I went to Blockbuster, and Blockbuster is a very different experience from most video rental stores. Even Family Video, which was a chain, was similar to those mom and pop indie video rental stores.
The back room. You always had the back room at the independent joints. They made the big money off of those dirty tapes.
Well, you had those, but the thing that sets Blockbuster apart from most of them is that Blockbuster specialized in new releases. The entire outer wall of pretty much every Blockbuster was just tape after tape of popular new releases.
Right.
And then they had a
You
smaller...
want to watch Flubber? We got 30 copies of it.
Over and over again. Face Off, 100 copies of that, and you'd rent it for 2 nights.
Have some sort of guarantee of availability or something like that?
I don't know if they had a guarantee of availability. One thing they did dabble in, though, was exclusivity. You could only sometimes get new releases, and they did this with a lot of studios. You could only get new releases from Blockbuster for a certain period of time.
Wow.
And so if you're a mom and pop, if you're a Family Video, you're now competing with Blockbuster, who's catering to people who want to see the newest movies that are just coming out. Whereas with a Family Video, they want a wider selection of movies. They want you to be able to like find these weird, unique films that most people don't even know about. And Blockbuster didn't so much cater to that.
They had the interior shelves, right? Kind of like at the grocery store, right? But you shop the perimeter for the good stuff, and then, or then in the new stuff.
Well, and you'd get the new releases for like two nights, I think, or something like that. Sometimes one night, whereas the favorites, the stuff that had been out for a while, those you could get for $3 to $5 nights. They were a little cheaper. But Blockbuster, I don't know, Blockbuster felt like a different beast from most of the other video rental stores.
They were the huge corporate behemoth.
So all of this started back in 1975 when Sony released its first Betamax VCR.
It's a thing of beauty.
2 years later, the first video rental shop opens up. And not only did they rent out video cassettes, they also rented out equipment. If you didn't have your own VCR, you could rent that as well.
Well, you had to be able to, right?
Yeah. And shortly after this, a bunch of the other chains opened up. West Coast Video, Rogers Video in Canada, Hollywood Video, Blockbuster, and Family Video.
Not to mention all these little individual mom and pop shops and in the backs of Radio Shacks. And
you could even go to gas stations and grocery stores. Drugstores would rent you videos. And it was just a really popular thing. And a large reason for this, too, is that that's the only way that you could see a movie after it had left theaters was to rent it, because Most
Well,
people
certainly on demand. I
Yes.
mean, maybe sooner or later you catch it on TV.
could
but,
be, yeah. But the reason for that is that home entertainment, particularly with Betamax and VHS, it was prohibitively expensive for a few reasons. One, it actually was expensive to make the material. Two, studios were a little worried that if they allowed people to buy their own
Yeah.
tapes,
Studios didn't want to do this.
yeah, they didn't. It
Well,
would cut into their ticket prices. They
I
didn't
mean,
want that.
keep in mind, of course, right, when the video cassette and the VCR first emerged, they weren't selling commercially released movies
No.
on this, right? They were blank tapes that you were meant to use to tape television
Yes.
and watch it again later.
Yeah.
But of course, television was a platform for movies that no longer made any money
Yeah.
in the second run theaters. So of course the studios are very wary about this.
Yeah, and actually, after the first Sony released their first Betamax VCR, Universal Studios and Disney took them to court because they believed that Sony was complicit in copyright infringement by allowing consumers to record things off of the air. And this case didn't get resolved until 1984. And so home video didn't really take off, and it continued to be expensive because most manufacturers of technology that could play home videos, companies aside from Sony, they didn't want to get into it. They wanted to find out what the result of that court case was going to be before they invest all of this money in the infrastructure of trying to make
into a thing that's going to be a piracy machine legally, right?
Exactly. 1984, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Sony, and they said you are not complicit in copyright infringement just because you create a device that can allow you to record things off the air. And if a person chooses to do that, it's covered under fair use. It's a private activity. As long as you're not showing these videos in public, it's free game. You should be able to record whatever you want and then watch it whenever you want. Once that happens, all of these other players get in, and then the price of home videos start going down. And now home videos are being priced to be bought by consumers. Originally,
Priced to own.
yes, originally it was $80 to $100 to buy a single tape on Betamax or VHS.
Easily more. Easily more. 200 plus.
Now,
and we're talking in the 80s.
Yes.
$200.
Yes, and to a rental video house, that's not so bad. You rent it out, a couple dozen times, you've made your money back, and then
it's a big
anything
investment,
after that.
but yes, it needed to be an investment.
Video rental stores. Don't see too many of them around anymore.
No.
And actually, I think the only ones that really are around are the independently run ones that are kind of just made for cinephiles.
Certainly, yeah. And there are none of the chains left. That's for sure.
Yeah. And even then, I wonder if it's even for profit or if it's just people who are passionate about it and have enough capital to just keep it running. But that's basically the only way that it's around anymore.
I think even Redbox is now officially defunct. And that was sort of like the video rental store of the future.
We lost Family Video back in 2021. They had a good run. I didn't realize for the last 10 years that they were running, they also had this sort of deal where you could order pizza and a movie. They partnered with a pizza company, and you could call them up, order a pizza, and then the pizza and the movie would be delivered at the same time.
Oh, see, that's nice.
Yeah.
They got really into CBD too.
That's right. Yeah. Family Video. They did a lot of good things, but ultimately just couldn't survive it. I think streaming and a bunch of other things just put them under the same way they put under a bunch of the other video rental stores. Blockbuster is no more. That one more due to mismanagement than anything, and inability to change with the times. But yeah, over time, streaming opened up, video on demand became a thing, and it's too easy to look at your library that you have on your computer at home or your TV at home. And if you can choose that over actually driving to a brick and mortar store, most people are probably going to choose the streaming or on demand option.
Right. It's the least frictionless.
Yeah.
But with almost everything, as things get easier, they get more streamlined and they get more frictionless, we lose something, don't you think?
Yeah.
Something always gets lost.
I do remember going to a video rental store being this experience, and I went to video rental stores probably once or twice a week. It was just an event. It was a lot of fun.
Well, and I mean, the brilliance of a brief rental model too is that you always have to come back, right? And especially with like the grocery stores, right?
Yeah.
Why not rent movies? Because that means that customer has to come back in 3 days to return this thing. They're probably going to leave with something else again. So,
it feels different from streaming in that respect too, is that when you have a streaming service, it's always there. You always have access to it. And you take that for granted, I think, after a certain amount of time. Whereas with a video rental store, you go in there, you pay them money to rent it for 3 days. You have to watch it in those 3 days or it's wasted. And so you really
Right.
feel compelled to watch the movie. Even if you rent it and decide, oh, I didn't really want that, you still probably watch it anyway. And you see a movie you
Sunken
wouldn't have
cost
otherwise.
fallacy.
Yeah. I don't know, there was something great about just walking down the aisles and looking at all of the cover art on every single film and like, picking the box up and reading the back and seeing who's involved in this. That's not something you
The
really
packaging,
get.
the sleeve art,
Yes.
and this really boils down to physical media, right? This is what we've seen is not the death, but certainly the massive loss of physical media. And I think the pendulum swings a little bit too now, because I think now people realize, wow, I really leaned into all this convenience. I stopped going to the video store. I had my Netflix, I had my Hulu, right? It was just too easy. But after a while, you realize that these are a little more ephemeral, right? Maybe that thing that you expected to watch just disappears.
And on top of that, the process of choosing a movie off of Netflix has always felt so much more burdensome to me. It feels like a chore, and I often get bogged down in the selection and how it's presented to me. Whereas just walking through a video store and looking at the covers, it was kind of a joy. It was like an adventure. You were kind of like excited
thing to do.
Yeah,
right.
You could go somewhere and find something, and then for 3 days you had access to that movie. Especially once my family had Blockbuster rewards, and you could like save up to free rentals, and you could keep movies for 5 days. We would go in there and just rent 6 or 7 movies, and I think we would watch all of them. You know, that was probably the era of my life where I saw more movies than I did at any other point.
Yeah.
And I think it largely was because it was just so exciting to go to the video rental store. And that excitement just really isn't there for streaming services, I don't think.